What's up, Joe? What's up, everybody? Today we're sitting down with Javier Sanz Ortiz, international lawyer with vast knowledge and experience in the world of soccer. Javier joins us today to talk World Cup, the action on the field, and the business aspects connected to it all. We'll also talk about the World Cups in 2022 in Qatar and the 2026 Cup to be hosted by the U.S., Canada, and Mexico. It's a lot on tap, and we'll get right to it right after my man Andres Cantor is done. I'm excited to have with me today on Sports360 Javier Sanz Ortiz. Javier is an international lawyer who has been involved in the game of soccer from the beginning of his career. Javier has represented athletes, clubs, and coaches on the international stage. He is also the author of a book called The Economic Models in European and American Football, Pursuing Profitability, and he has won several awards for his work. And I'm so excited to have him joining us today on Sports 360. Javier, how are you today?
Hello, yes, I'm great. I'm very, very excited to be here with you today. I've seen the group of individuals you have interviewed previously, and I feel honored to be part of this. Thank you very much.
Sure. I'm glad to have you here, to have an opportunity to talk about the World Cup, to talk about soccer generally. And for me, Javier, and we've talked about this, you and I have separately, that I am not a big soccer fan, but I am interested in sports and in the personalities and the issues and all of the things that go with such a beautiful game as soccer and an event like the World Cup. So I'm excited to talk with you today, someone who has vast experience in soccer and working in soccer for so many years, because I think I'm going to learn some good things today. And I'd like to see if we can start the conversation just, talking generally about the World Cup. As we sit here today, Javier, it's July 2nd. A couple of days before the 4th of July, and we're in the knockout round of the World Cup. And I just want to ask you, generally overall, what are your thoughts on how the tournament has gone so far as a spectator, as you're watching and enjoying the games? What are your thoughts on the tournament to date?
Well, I think that I've been able to watch several World Cups throughout my life. I am 32 years old, and I've been following soccer since I was a kid. And I think that this is one of the most interesting World Cups I've ever watched for different reasons. The first one is because the VAR has been implemented. The VAR is a system that allows referees to review different plays during the game that might be uncertain for them. So, for example, if there is a penalty that hasn't been called and the ref is not sure about if it was a penalty or not, they can review those plays. I think that's making the game more fair, and that's making people be away from that whole controversy of that was a bad call or, the ref was mistaken. That doesn't happen, or it's not happening in this World Cup. And I think that this is very, very interesting for the sake of soccer. Secondly, is because of the number of goals scored. I think that right now at this point we're just seeing goals on every single game. No games have been 0-0 so far, if I'm not mistaken. And that's great for the soccer fans, but also for fans that are following soccer for the first time, because it's making the sport exciting for them. So I'm very happy with what is happening on the field, and with all the conversations I'm having with people on a daily basis, because it feels like everybody is very, very excited about this World Cup.
Yeah, and I was in a restaurant the other day. It was the middle of the afternoon. I was having lunch, and I don't recall what game was on, but you could just feel the excitement in the restaurant as those were around the television watching the game, and so it certainly generates a lot of excitement. Now, for you, Javier, yesterday had to be a tough day. I mean, you hail from Spain, and Spain got knocked out by Russia. So how difficult was that for you on yesterday?
Well, I'm not gonna lie. It was a tough day for me, for Spaniards in general. Nobody. Well, I mean, when your team is part of the World Cup, you're expecting them to go as far as possible. But at the same time, I've been playing sports my whole life, and I understand that sometimes you win and you lose. Russia played a really, really good game with their style of playing. I think that the beauty of soccer is that you can play in different styles to win the game, and all of them are good if they help you and your team to use the skills of the players you have, in the best way possible. They were able to defend the whole game. They were able to content Spain and go to the penalties. And at that point, you cannot control anything. Anything can happen. Regretfully, it was unlucky for Spain, but I think that we will come back stronger in Qatar in 2022 and try to go further.
Sure, I'm sure that's right. And I know the day before that, we saw two icons get eliminated, Messi and Ronaldo, both Argentina and Portugal losing on Saturday. And when that happens, Javier, in the context of a World Cup, is that something that is viewed as a disappointment from a spectator standpoint, or is it the opposite, where it actually generates more excitement for the tournament because, perhaps you have some upstart teams or others who are now playing well and advancing? How is that viewed when we see some of the icons get knocked out of the tournament?
I think that obviously this is disappointing for the soccer fans because you're probably losing the two best players in the world, right? Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo. There's nobody like them at this point. But at the same time, it's a clear reflection of what the World Cup is about. It's not about one individual. It's not about one talented player. It's about the team. And it's about how strong you are as a team. In this case, I think that France and Uruguay, which were playing against Argentina and Portugal, are stronger teams than Argentina and Portugal, and I think that they showed that yesterday. For example, France, they have a very, very talented group of young players, very young players that were able to play the final of the Euro Cup 2 years ago. And I think that as a unit, they are generating excitement because of those kind of players. Young fans are finding new superstars to follow that are not Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo anymore. And some of those are in France. And in the case of Uruguay, this team has had the same head coach for the last 15 years, which can tell you how solid and how structured and how much they know what their style of playing is. And that is really, really important when you're playing a short tournament like this one. You need to understand what your style of playing is. You cannot have doubts, and you just have to go ahead and execute when you are on the field. And that's what Uruguay did. I think that both teams, France and Uruguay, were not only favorites for the games on Saturday, but they're also favorites to go farther in this World Cup.
Interesting. And in terms of fan excitement and the passion, because I think that's one of the things for me, Javier, that I'm really struck by when it comes to the World Cup and to soccer generally, is the passion that the fans have for the game. And the only thing that I've seen that comes close to it here in the States actually was the World Baseball Classic. So it was an international event that I attended. I attended the first World Baseball Classic when I was working for the Players Association. And to see teams like Venezuela and the Dominican Republic and Cuba playing in a small stadium in Puerto Rico, and the passion that the fans had in watching that game was something that I've never ever saw before. And yet that seems to be something that's pretty commonplace when it comes to soccer generally, and certainly to the World Cup. Um, so I mean, that to me is something that is just striking. And so does the passion increase, or is that something that in soccer you see that kind of excitement and emotion from the fans, World Cup or no World Cup?
Well, I think that obviously if you take out of the equation the super fans, those fans that live every single game of their team with as they are living for it and as they need them to win badly every single game, I think that there is no other feeling like supporting a team during the World Cup. Maybe if your team makes it to the Champions League final in Europe or to those kind of international competitions. But at the same time, I think that there is nothing stronger than supporting a team, right? You are not supporting colors. You are supporting a nation, and that power and that support that those teams are having from the countries, it's huge. This morning, I was thinking about our conversation last week, and I was trying to find a way of explaining what the World Cup is for somebody that is not a soccer fan. And I think that the best way of explaining that is probably if you take a blender and you put on it the Super Bowl and March Madness, and the result of that, that craziness that goes on during one month, and that passion you feel for your team if they are there, I think that's probably the most similar to the World Cup.
Yeah, that's a good analogy. Well, let me ask you this though: if that's the case, what happens? Like for example, with you, you're from Spain. You were rooting for Spain, but Spain has gotten knocked out of the tournament. What does that do for you as a fan and as a spectator? Do you now say, well, my nation is knocked out, and so I'm going to go do something else, or do you continue to stay invested in the tournament?
I think that not only me, because obviously watching soccer is part of my job, so I would watch it anyway. But there's also there's also a fun part on me and on all the soccer fans on following other teams once the team has been knocked out, right? So there is always a possibility to root for your grandmother's country, or for your girlfriend's country, or for that player you really like and you weren't able to support before because you were supporting your country. Now you can support for that team. Now you can support that team. And in myself personally, I have to admit that probably this is not going to make me look really good, but my team after Spain was knocked out was Japan, right? Because I feel like I like to support the underdog, and even if Japan and Japanese Soccer League is on the top 10 of leagues that generate more revenue per year, with the NBA, NFL, NHL. I felt like nobody was expecting them to be able to compete against Belgium, and I like that idea. I like the idea of supporting somebody and nobody expecting to win, because they actually put some work today, and they were almost able to win the game and classified for quarterfinals. So I think that excitement can be taken to any single game, and people do that. People, even if your team is not playing, you always choose one team that is playing that day, and you root for that team. That's part of the excitement, and that's what brings people together.
So we have the competition on the field, and we have the passion that you just talked about from the fans. But we also have economics. I mean, this is a big sporting event, and there's huge dollars involved. And so I want to talk a little bit about the economics. You're a businessman, you're a lawyer, you've been involved in soccer in a variety of ways for a number of years. Can you talk to us a little bit about the benefits of the World Cup for the hosting country in particular, but also, just talk about some of the benefits, both economic and non-economic, associated with the World Cup?
Sure. I think that first of all, I would personally differentiate between two types of benefits, right? Sustainable benefits and short-term benefits. And I think that can help people to understand a bit better what we're talking about here. As part of the sustainable benefits are, for example, the facilities that are built for the event. This is the stadiums, right? In order to host the World Cup, a hosting country needs to have a certain number of stadiums that can host certain number of people. Either if the country has those stadiums already or if they need to build them, this is obviously something that's going to remain there for some time, and it will be able to be used by the cities, by the clubs. So it's something that it's an asset that a country can keep after the World Cup. Another one is the increase on the number and quality of football development programs, right? Either both for elite game, talent identification, and grassroots. This obviously, what this means is that if you are hosting a World Cup and this is getting a lot of attention from the people of the country, the first thing you would see is that first of all, kids want to get involved in soccer, and they turn to pay attention more to soccer, and they wanna try to make it to the World Cup, to the World Cup national team that's going to play in that World Cup in particular. So this helps soccer to attract more talent, but also to pay more attention to that and develop better programs for those kids to be the best player they can be, right? Another benefit is the increase on the cooperation and goodwill between the various stakeholders, which are the member association, the government, and other bid stakeholders. Also, as you mentioned before, it increases the civic pride and community empowerment. You feel proud that your country is hosting a World Cup, and for 8 years, because since you get the World Cup, since you get the hosting rights until you celebrate the World Cup, there is 8 years time frame. For 8 years, the whole soccer world is paying attention to your country, and they keep talking about it. So, living in that country and being part of that experience is something that makes you feel proud as well. Another benefit is the enhancement, is how the partnerships can be enhanced through that, and how global brands and brands that are part of that country start paying attention to soccer in particular, and they want to be involved on soccer, they want to invest on soccer, they want to sponsor soccer events, because that's something that's probably one of the trendiest things that is happening in those 8 years in the country. And obviously, don't forget that those players playing the World Cup, those players that are representing your country, are role models for kids. So as I said before, kids will be paying attention to those players and will be trying to learn from them, and that's something that remains on how the culture of the country grows and develops. Those are part of the benefits that are going to remain in the country for a long time. And I think that maybe if you're okay with that, we can talk about the clear example of the Russian World Cup right now.
Yeah, I would. I want to ask you a question before you get there. So hold that. I want to come back to that. I just want to ask you, because especially on the growing of the game part, that's something that here in the United States we've heard for a good while that soccer is growing and it's going to continue to grow and become a dominant sport. As someone who is well versed in soccer, have you seen that in the United States? And I'm trying to get a view that's not a biased view. I don't want, right, someone who looks at this from the international perspective. Have you seen in this country, for example, the growth of soccer over the years, as because the U.S. national team, especially the women, have had some success, and the men have had some success along the way as well. But have you seen that as something that has taken place in this country? Some of the things that you're talking about in terms of this, I will call the infrastructure growth of the game.
Well, definitely. I think that there are two United States of America right now. There is one prior to when North America, U.S., Canada, Mexico got the hosting rights of the World Cup for 2026, and there is another U.S. after they got the rights. And the reason why is because soccer has been growing exponentially in the U.S. since the Major League Soccer was created, right, in 1993. That was part of hosting the World Cup here in the U.S. At that point as well. And I could tell you what I feel, but I also think that it's important to go to the numbers. And the reality is that right now soccer is number one participating in sports in the U.S. as of now. And if we, I think that the numbers are like more than 24 million people play soccer at some level in the U.S. And this is, and the U.S. is second only to China, which means that they are in terms of fans of the game. There is no doubt that there is a huge interest. This is one of the countries where you have more fans of the game, and most importantly, more people that play the sport, not only watch it but also play it. But also if you think about TV viewership of the games, I think that here in the States, 26.5 million people watched the last final of the World Cup in 2014, and this was the men's World Cup, right? And just to give you some examples, the NCAA Men's College Basketball Championship had 23 million viewers, and the Winter Olympics closing ceremony had 21 million. So it's even higher than this. But when you think about women's soccer, it's the same situation. More than 25 million Americans watched the Women's World Cup final in 2015, the World Cup that took place in Canada and that faced the U.S. versus Japan. So, there is clearly an interest for soccer here. And what I think is that if you combine that interest and the fact that the U.S. has more than 325 million people living in the country, and then you use the hosting the World Cup as a loudspeaker for this, I think that soccer is going to grow even faster in the following 8 years.
Okay. All right. So now let's go back to the point you were about to make. I think you're going to relate what's going on in Russia now to the points that you were talking about earlier about some of the benefits of hosting the tournament.
Yeah. Well, I was going to use an example that is happening right now, so we could relate to something that is real. Right. Reports have. Russian media has reported that Russia has invested around $14 billion on hosting the World Cup. Just to give you an idea, $6 billion of those were invested in transport infrastructure. $4 billion were invested on stadium construction, and around $700 million were invested in accommodation. So if you think about that, and if you look at numbers, you see that transport infrastructure, stadium construction, and accommodation are elements that are not going to be there only for the World Cup, but Russians and tourists are going to be able to use them after the World Cup as well.
Sure. Yeah, I mean that's those are excellent points, and so that's part of what goes on with all of the World Cups that are being held. Now, on that point, Javier, let's transition a little bit. This World Cup is not over, and by the way, before we're done, you're going to give us your expert opinion on how the World Cup is going to play out, and you're going to get all of it right. You're going to get every match right. And so we're going to get that from you before we leave, but. If we look forward beyond this World Cup, the next World Cup in 2022 is in Qatar. And there have been, some reports at some point along the way of some concerns with some of the building and building up the stadiums and the infrastructure. And in particular, the working conditions under which those workers were going. There were some real concerns about that. Do you know where that sits now? Is that something that were there really some concerns there? And if there were, have they been addressed?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. As you have mentioned, on 2022, the FIFA World Cup is scheduled to take place in Qatar. And I think this is important to be mentioned. This will be the first World Cup ever to be held in the Arab world, and the first in a Muslim majority country. And it will be the first World Cup held in Asia since the 2002 tournament in South Korea and Japan. Why do I say this? Because at the end of the day, soccer is a global sport, right? And you need to give those countries that are not so strong on the soccer world a chance to be present and a chance to share the excitement of this beautiful sport. So yeah, that's the good part, right? That this is very unique in terms of giving Qatar the chance to organize the World Cup. But obviously there has been huge controversies with this decision, and if you want, we can talk about them. Well, the first one is corruption, right? Accusations of corruption have been made relating to how Qatar won the right to host the event. FIFA completed an internal investigation into these allegations, and a report cleared Qatar of any wrongdoing. But even those investigators that were part of FIFA at that point weren't so sure that that report was being or the investigations were being run in the right way. So as of now, there are still doubts on if Qatar paid money to win votes to host the World Cup. So far, nothing has been done in this sense. But yeah, that's something that is still in the air, and there are conversations about that in the soccer world. Another controversy is the treatment of foreign workers, as you have mentioned before. A number of groups and media outlets have expressed concern over the suitability of Qatar to host the event, mainly because of their interpretations of human rights, particularly worker conditions and the rights of fans in the LGBT community, since, as you know, homosexuality is illegal in Qatar.
Right.
And even Amnesty International has referred to workers' conditions as forced labor, and stated that workers have been suffering human rights abuses despite worker welfare standards being drafted in 2014. There was actually an investigation by the Guardian newspaper claiming that many workers are denied food and water, have their identity papers taken away from them, and that they are not paid or not paid on time. So there has been some working on this. And in October 2017, the International Trade Union Confederation said that Qatar had signed an agreement to improve the situation of more than 2 million migrant workers in the country. And it is expected that this agreement will affect the general situation of workers in a positive way, especially of those who work on the 2022 FIFA World Cup. As an example, workers will no longer need their employer's permission to leave the country or change their jobs.
Okay.
Another controversy, and this was something that it was a challenge, and it we actually spoke about that last week when we had this first conversation, is the extreme heat. Right.
Yes. Yes.
Obviously, this is key. This is key and very dangerous for players and fans' welfare. And even Joseph Blatter, which is the former president of FIFA, remarked that it was a huge mistake to give the World Cup rights to Qatar due to the extreme heat. It's interesting that he mentioned that after they gave them the rights, but at least he admitted his mistake. So in this sense, there has been two decisions that has been made. The first one is to change the date of the World Cup from summer to winter. The other one is to build stadiums with cooling technology. So these stadiums they are building in Qatar are stadiums that are able to reduce temperatures within the stadium by up to 36 degrees Fahrenheit.
Okay, that's interesting.
Expensive solution though, but hopefully it will make the experience of the fans and the players a little bit more comfortable while they're there.
Right. So and the tournament is going to be played in November, December, as you mentioned, in the winter to accommodate, to avoid the heat of the summer, but also too, Javier, isn't the schedule condensed? Aren't they playing the tournament in 28 days? Is that normal? Or is that a shorter period of time?
Well, I've heard a lot of comments about this because it's going to be 28 days. If you think about this World Cup that is taking place right now, it goes from June 14th to July 15th, if I'm not mistaken. So that's around the same time.
Sure.
You're talking about maybe 30, 32 days and not 28. And yeah, obviously, the more games you play in a shorter period of time, the worse this is for the players. Because, you need at least 3 days to recover from a soccer game due to all the effort your body is doing. So maybe the case that they're exposing players a little bit more to injuries, but I don't see a huge difference between the length of the World Cup in Qatar and the length of the previous World Cups. One comment I would like to make about the calendar itself is that, obviously, this calendar and moving the date to November and December has created a huge controversy between some of the leagues. And actually, there has been statements from the Football Federation of Australia and also from the Premier League thinking about taking legal actions against FIFA because this could jeopardize their competition, or at least the schedule of their competition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that is interesting. So what happens now, though? And you may have to explain this. So we don't have any kind of conflicts with the World Cup being played now with other federations and other leagues, because I mean, is that something that doesn't exist? I mean, because they're complaining, I would imagine, because the games are being held in November and December as opposed to the summer. Correct?
Yeah, that's correct.
And so now we don't have those issues. If the games are played in the summer, that doesn't present any conflicts with any leagues or federations?
No, because if you think about that, most of the leagues actually have a calendar that goes from August, September to April, May, or May, June. So usually during the summer they don't play any competitions. And the main two leagues that actually have a different calendar are the Japanese Soccer League and the Major League Soccer. But for them, they keep playing while the World Cup is happening. So it might affect a little bit their TV ratings, but they keep playing while the World Cup is taking place.
Got it. Okay. So now recently, right, 2026, it's been announced that the United States, Canada, and Mexico will host the World Cup. And that's the first time we've had three countries hosting the World Cup. What went into that decision as far as you know? Because why did we get to that point where we're having two other countries and not just the United States or not just Canada? How did it get to be that we have three countries hosting the 2026 Cup?
Well, I think that first of all, right now you need to get very creative when you try to bid to host an international event, and you need to try to do things that have never been before, right? So I think that the idea of combining three countries that are obviously in the same area and that are connected and that have a history together is a good way of telling a new story. And this is a story about being together. It's a story about creating something, even if you are from different cultures, even if you have different regulations, even if you speak a different language. And I think that this is a very interesting way of approaching hosting international events. Also, the fact of organizing that in three countries like Mexico, US, and Canada is going to allow spread out a little bit the interest in the event, and it's going to spread out the energy and the excitement in three different countries, which, as you can imagine, for FIFA is something huge. You're not only approaching the fans in the US. Now you are already engaging the fans in Canada, the US, and Mexico.
Yeah. And what about the structure of the tournament? Is that been set? Do we know how many games are going to be held in each of the three countries?
Yeah, we know. Well, basically, this is as you have mentioned, this is the first time three countries are organizing this event together. But this is not the only novelty. There is going to be an increase in the number of teams from 32 to 48, and therefore on the number of games. So we are increasing from 64 games, that are the games that are taking place now in Russia and the games that will be taking place in Qatar, and we are going from 64 to 80 games, which obviously is going to increase revenue for the countries. Is going to increase the length of the stay of the tourists when they are coming to support their teams. And coming to your question, the US is going to be the country that is going to host most of the games, and they will be hosting around 75% of the games, and Canada and Mexico will be hosting the rest.
And so you mentioned earlier about the sustainable benefits and other benefits of hosting. So here we are, and as you said, we have an 8-year runway, right, where the U.S. and Canada and Mexico as well are going to be gearing up for the World Cup and making all kinds of infrastructure improvements and changes and things of that sort. And so the expectation should be, I would think, that given some of the numbers you gave earlier about the interest in the United States for soccer, that can only increase, or that should be the hope, right? That now that we have this 8-year window and then run up to the World Cup, that's going to bode well for the continued growth of the game here in the United States.
Yeah, that's completely right. If you think about the soccer interest, how fans are engaged with the game, this can only help as a loudspeaker to promote soccer even louder and to make everybody pay attention to this game instead of the other major league events that are taking place in the United States. And just to give you an idea of how much impact this World Cup can have in the US. And I will be approaching the US because first of all is where most of the games are going to take place, 75%, as I said, but also because you cannot compare how spread out soccer is in Mexico, which is like soccer in Mexico is a religion, with how soccer is in the US. But hosting the 2026 FIFA World Cup can generate more than $5 billion in short-term economic activity in the US.
Wow.
including 40,000 jobs and more than 1 billion incremental worker earnings across North America. And this is only the short term impact, right? One of the most important reports that the Mexico, Canada, and U.S. committee put together was a report focused on the economic impact, and this study estimated that individual host cities could expect to see approximately from 160 to 620 million in incremental economic activity for hosting an event. And obviously, why is there such a difference or such a big difference between 160 and 220 million? Well, because it depends on the number of matches hosted, the venue capacity, current levels of tourism, cost of living. There are different factors that need to be taken into account. But this is obviously going to be very beneficial for the short term and for these 8 months, for these 8 years, as we were mentioning. But this is not the only element. In my opinion, I think that the growth of soccer as a brand is going to make global brands to want to be more engaged with this sport in particular. There are different reasons for that, but there are 2 that are very simple to understand. The first one is sponsoring a soccer team or a soccer league in the U.S. is cheaper than sponsoring any other major league or any other major league team. So if you want to be a sponsor of the Cleveland Cavaliers, or if you want to be a sponsor of the New York Yankees, obviously you can imagine how much you need to invest in order to combine your logo with their logo.
Right.
That's not the same situation with Major League Soccer and Major League Soccer teams. So that's something that is going to be important for sponsors, because you are attaching your name to a sport that is trendy, is going to be around for a long time, but also is it's a hot topic right now, because the soccer world and the whole world has their eyes in the U.S., Canada, and Mexico right now.
Right. Well, I mean, it's going to be exciting times over the next 8 years then here in the United States and also in Canada and in Mexico. Okay, so Javier, we're about to close, and so I'm coming back, as I promised, to get your predictions on this World Cup. We want to get the benefit of your knowledge and of the game, and give us your predictions of how you see this World Cup, the 2018 World Cup, playing itself out over the next 2 weeks or so.
Well, first of all, I think that you're probably asking me the most difficult question I've ever been asked. These are, as I said, this is like March Madness and Super Bowl, and we both have experienced how March Madness goes. You never know who can win. Everything is crazy. You have this last shot that gets in, and one team is out, the other one is in. And I'm just thinking about the Super Bowl the Patriots played last year, not this year, but last year. How crazy it was, that comeback they had. So. So, it's very, very difficult, but I might try. I'm going to try to at least let you know what I think in terms of the team. So we know that right now we have Sweden playing Switzerland tomorrow. I think that Switzerland might win that game. Basically, I think both of them are very similar, and they have a similar structure in terms of playing, but I think Switzerland might have more talented players in this event. So I will give them that possibility to go to the quarterfinals. Then we have Colombia, England, and in that case, I would choose England. Really young team, really talented players, good coach, and good structure. So I think they can beat Colombia tomorrow. And then what we have there is we have England, Switzerland. I think England might win that game because I think they are a stronger team. The other game that is on that bracket is Russia, Croatia. it's true that Russia has a very strong team in terms of a unit, but Croatia has a strong team and also talented players. I will give them the chance to be there in the semifinals. On the other side of the bracket, Uruguay versus France, I think you're not going to believe this because I've said that France had a very, very strong team, but I think that Uruguay is even stronger as a unit. And it's this kind of team that would never, it's very hard to beat, and they can score in any chance they have. So I think Uruguay might go to the semifinals. And Brazil, Belgium, I would say that Brazil will go to the semifinals because they have a better defensive structure. So now I know I don't want to extend myself a lot here. So now we have Uruguay and Brazil, and Croatia, England. I think that Brazil might play the final against Croatia. And wow, Jeff, then everything can happen. Everything can happen. I personally would like to see Croatia winning because that's not something very common. And I think that would make fans that are not part of the soccer environment to pay more attention to the game and to think that, oh wow, it's possible to be an underdog. It's possible not to have a very, very strong name and still be a world champion, as it happened with Spain in 2010. That was the first time we won the World Cup. Nobody was expecting that we could win. And once you do it, then you have a lot of synergies happening in that country. Then you have a lot of potential opportunities for the national team, for the country, for the kids to grow with that loudspeaker, which is being the world champion. So I would like to see Croatia win it. And I have a lot of Brazilian friends, so I hope they understand this.
Okay, so I was writing all of this down, so we're going to see how it plays out. And no matter how it plays out, I think we all can agree it should be exciting over the next 10 days or so. Well, but Javier, listen, I want to thank you for taking some time out and sharing with us your knowledge of the game. And, for me in particular, again, I learned a lot about some of the some of the intricacies of the economics and the other benefits of the game, but also just learning about the World Cup overall. So I appreciate you coming and spending some time with us, and I look forward to you coming back because I want to talk about some of the great things that you're doing in your career. We didn't touch on that. We wanted to touch on the World Cup, given that's what's going on right now. But I'd like to have you back at some point to talk a little bit more about some of the great things that you're personally doing in your career.
Well, I can only say that, as you know, I learned everything I know about baseball from you. While I had you as a professor, I would say that at the beginning it was a painful experience because it wasn't only learning the baseball cases that made an impact into sports law here in the U.S., but also trying to learn the rules at the same time. I won't say that was easy. It was a little bit painful, but I've been hoping and waiting for a long time to be able to return you the favor and try to share with you some of my 2 cents on something. So I'm happy that I was able to do that, and I would be more than happy to come back whenever you want to have me.
Sure, and I'd be glad to have you come back, and we can talk about again some of the things that you're doing because I think you're one of the more, I believe, fascinating individuals out there working in sports today. So I'd like to have you back and talk about all the great things you're doing.
Happy to do that, and I think you're being too kind. But thank you very much. Please keep having an idea of me, Jeff. I would really appreciate that.
All right. Well, I appreciate it. So we'll catch up with you and we'll see how this World Cup ends up. So thanks, Javier, for coming on.
Thank you, Jeff.
That was a great sit down with Javier Sanz Ortiz. I learned a lot about the World Cup from his insights, and I trust you did too. He gave us the ins and outs of both the competition and the business of the World Cup. If you enjoyed this episode, let us know. Leave us a comment and tell us what you think. As I make my way out of here, I'm riding shotgun with Scully. But don't worry, it's all good. I got my seatbelt on. God willing, I'll be back next week with another fascinating guest on Sports 360.